is amazing. Look at all these airports where that is the only plane. Isn't that incredible? We are so remote that not even Rex Regional Air comes here. What are these airports built for? Just in case Gina Reinhardt wants to come here and be like, are you doing your job? Yes. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go back to WA then.
Water. You can't live with it, you can't live without it. Oh wait, sorry, I mean you can't live without it. That's why I found the Murray-Darling Basin Plan such a fascinating topic, because the politicians and bureaucrats currently in charge of the plan seem to believe that people and industries and entire ecosystems can in fact live without water. So the purpose of this documentary is, I guess, to prove my very radical thesis that no, people can't live without water. And to achieve this difficult objective, we met our friend Chris Brooks, farmer and chair of Southern Riverina Irrigators, and took an aerial tour of the Murray-Darling Basin. We visited a bunch of basin communities and stakeholders to see how water mismanagement has been affecting them. First things first, to get this doco, you're going to have to understand one thing. Water is a commodity. Water has been decoupled from land in this country, which means anyone can buy water rights. This makes water like a stock. It's tradable. Ostensibly, the reason for this market is to account for water taken from the environment and to keep that capped under a certain amount. So if you hear the word cap, that's the amount of water that can be taken from the environment and used for irrigation. But just think about this. There's a water market, and like any other market, players can manipulate the market for their own material gain. The scary thing about a water market, though, is sometimes manipulating the market means causing ecological, social, and economic catastrophe, the likes of which Australia has never seen. And that's where the National Party comes in. As you'll see in this documentary, it's the National Party that dictates water policy in this country, and underneath them, it's networks of stakeholders and webs of patronage that dictate National Party policy. Sorry to get so dystopian so quickly, but it's only going to get worse. So let's get worse. Foreign companies can own water in this country, but don't worry, they're held to a very different standard to Aussie farmers. A lower one. Foreign companies don't have to pay capital gains tax on the profits they make trading water. Want an example of why this is bad? Well, we flew over Cubby Station, the largest irrigation property in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's majority owned by Shandong Ryu, a Chinese textile giant. Cubby owns enough water to fill 184,000 Olympic swimming pools. That's 38 times the amount of water that the basin's entire indigenous community own, and that's just one Chinese company. Cubby is positioned in a pretty convenient spot, upstream near Dirranbandi in southern Queensland, right at the top of the Murray-Darling Basin, meaning that when there's any significant rain events upstream, Cubby prevents a lot of that water reaching downstream. Think this is bad? Well, it gets worse again. Because despite how economically and environmentally damaging Cubby Station is, it appears their water use is legal. Go slightly downstream, and this is not the case for many other cotton farms. To understand why this is, you've got to understand another concept, floodplain harvesting. Think about it like this. If bitcoins were water entitlements, a speculative abstract asset for most, floodplain harvesting is a little like Bitcoin mining if it were way worse for the environment. Actually, bad analogy. Simpler way of putting it, floodplain harvesting is a method of water theft, full stop. Basically, farms divert water that would naturally flow into the basin into private dams. This water can be later used for irrigation, usually to irrigate profitable yet water-intensive crops like cotton. This means floodplain harvesters, in theory, can save all their legal entitlements not using a drop for irrigation, instead treating those water licenses like stocks to speculate on. They can then use the unaccounted floodplain harvested or stolen water to irrigate their cotton, making water scarcer and their licenses, or as I like to call them stocks, more valuable. Who'd have thought that the drought could be so profitable, eh? It turns out most of these floodplain harvesting cotton farms are located in the northern basin, which means, again, like Cubby, if all the water is being taken upstream, nothing is going downstream. Our pilot Chris had first-hand experience with this fact. In 2018, his crops died due to the fact that he had no water allocation for his farm in Barooga, southern New South Wales.
The volume of water being taken by people in the north without a licence, this floodplain harvesting, has been allowed to go unchecked, period. And when John Howard actually made the statement in 1994, it was to be capped. And these people have refused to comply with any measurement or metering or granting of licences. They've just continued unabated to expand storages and collect massive volumes of water that, to such an extent that they've stopped the Darling River from flowing. And it's having a disastrous effect on everyone downstream. And that's where a large volume of our water has just disappeared.
This issue is a fine primer that will give you an idea of just how much moral and legal dexterity there is in the world of water. Floodplain harvesting is a practice that the New South Wales government itself has characterised as illegal. Almost all reputable legal professionals believe it's illegal. Yet the line the National Party and its allies are taking is essentially, well, technically it's not illegal, but pretty please, can you let us legalise it?
And when you've got towns all the way down the Darling with no water, because the well-connected guys in the north can use their political persuasion to get water first and foremost. They can take first grab, they take the lot, they don't pay for it. And as we've proven if you look at the legal opinions that we've paid to have drafted, it's not complying with the Basin Plan or even the New South Wales Water Management Act. So you have to ask the question, why do these guys think they have the right to shut off water to communities like Brewarrina and all the downstream towns, Wilcannia, all the way to Wentworth? And why do they have the right to kill fish and to wipe out Indigenous people's food supply and all the native animals along the track?
In order to understand the perspective of these cotton farmers, I sat down with Claire Miller, CEO of the New South Wales Irrigators Council and staunch defender of floodplain harvesting.
Now, when you're talking about on-farm storages, the reason there are so many on-farm storages in those northern valleys is because they don't have the great big public storages to catch the water and hold it and then distribute it out to everybody that they have down in the southern basin. So the farmers have been encouraged to put the storages on their properties so that,
But
when
who's
they
encouraging them?
That's been the government over the last, 30, 40 years? Yeah.
But it just seems like such a bad thing to encourage if it's like questionably legal.
No, wait a minute.
Questionably. I did say questionably.
Read the
Huge
quote
debate.
Read the quote from the DPIE. It's fairly like.
And we can provide you with the press release picking up, where there's ambiguity. It should be settled in favour of the... we can go backwards and forwards.
Yeah, but to be fair, you were happy to go backwards and forth when you had legal advice that supported your argument. But then when the legal advice came back, it was hidden by Pavey and just released now, and it kind of quashes your argument. You're kind of appealing to end legal tit for tat. Like, that's it. Isn't that a bit hypocritical?
We stand by our legal advice, but also equally... Others stand by their legal advice.
This legal advice that Claire is dismissing as ambiguous is internal department advice that states, on balance, and while not without doubt, we think the better view is that generally, the taking of water in the course of floodplain harvesting without an access licence from an unregulated river water source that is covered by a water sharing plan would constitute an offence. Also, there's comments from a department official acknowledging that it's illegal. It seems that everyone behind closed doors knows it's illegal. But even if I extended all the courtesy in the world and disregarded legal opinion and just pretended that floodplain harvesting was legal, is it right? Marianne Slattery is an ex-director of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. Now she's a water researcher and director of water consultancy firm Slattery & Johnson. Her research was responsible for uncovering the huge proliferation of on-farm storages, i.e. floodplain harvesting facilities, finding that these storages had increased by 140% since 1994. Do you think that floodplain harvesting exacerbated the drought?
If you mean it's floodplain harvesting meant that there's less water downstream and make the impact of the drought happen earlier and happen for longer downstream, then yes, absolutely. And nobody can argue that's not the case because that's just a hydrological reality. The more water you take upstream, the less water you've got downstream. And even if floodplain harvesting water occurred and it didn't get, got a part way down the river, wetted up a dry riverbank, maybe it doesn't get all the way to the end. The next time you get an event through, the riverbed's that much wetter, where the water gets that much further. So yes, it's just, that's not a controversial statement about whether floodplain harvesting exacerbates the drought. Nobody could argue that otherwise.
I just still can't get over this point of like, if there's less water naturally going into the water because of climate change, Why allow floodplain harvesting? That's naturally happened into the river for millions of years. Surely it knows where that water should go.
So you would have seen the photos of the last flood that went through, in March, that went through Guarda. And you look at that landscape, half of Moree is underwater.
Yeah.
The landscape is a sheet of water.
Yeah.
There's massive amounts going through, way more than anyone could possibly catch in the storages that they've got there. It's always important just to understand how much you can actually catch as a proportion of the total volume of water that's going across that landscape. Doesn't it make more sense to catch the water when it's in huge abundance than to be trying to sort of squeeze it out of, the rivers when it's drier? And you want it, the more
I'm just
water that
thinking
stays
maybe
in
for
the
like
rivers,
an
the better.
agricultural perspective, but surely not from an environmental perspective, because when you walk along those dry riverbeds, you do see a lot of skeletons of fish.
Oh, yeah, but what I'm saying is that those dry riverbeds are occurring during drought periods. When it floods, they're not dry. Witness what's been happening in the last sort of eight weeks, actually since Christmas, when the thunderstorms first started to come through and this dry period first started to break properly. Those thunderstorms over Christmas in those northern tributaries got the Barwon Darling flowing again, which was just fantastic. And then we've had the follow-up floods that have kept it flowing.
The thing is, even after those massive flood events Claire's talking about, there's still not enough water downstream. Menindee is only 2/3 full, and most importantly, floodplain harvesting still happens in fairly dry periods. Now, this entire argument may seem somewhat abstract until you see how much water these cotton farms take, even legally. That's a cotton farm, green as it gets, and see the body of water next to it? That's a private dam. This farm is owned by a prominent National Party donor by the name of Peter Harris. In 2017, then National Party MP and New South Wales Primary Industries Minister Niall Blair lobbied hard to have the Barwon-Darling water sharing plan altered, all to retrospectively justify a decision his department made a year earlier to grant Harris extra water rights. The following year, Harris was charged with water theft for illegally extracting water from the Barwon and operating pumps without working meters. He was convicted for the former, but not for operating pumps without working meters. Here are his pumps. Enhance. Stop. Sure hope those meters are working, Peter. Even if they are, there's something off about that amount of cotton. But this is just one example we see on the way to Brewarrina, a northern basin town on the Barwon River that has been extremely affected by cotton farming. Brewarrina Mayor Phil O'Connor has seen the effects that cotton has had on his community. He doesn't seem to buy the line that the Irrigators Council and National Allies are selling. He reckons the place has seen better days. So, when did this start deteriorating?
Yeah, when cotton came to the country.
Yeah?
Yep.
And when was that?
Oh, it was in the early 80s, late 70s, and probably earlier in some places. But the deterioration of these river systems, and I don't care who listens to it, or whatever. Since that's happened, the greed and the corruption of these rivers has just been filthy since that's happened.
Well, give me an idea of that.
Well,
What's the corruption look like?
well, just the greed, and that goes with it a lot, is the corruption side of it. Because how much do some people want? They might have a water allocation to grow, 300 hectares of crop, whatever that might be. And once people get a taste of how much wealth that can be obtained by having more and more and more of this crop, it just seems to get ingrained into them that they've got to have more. And a lot of people have said to me, and it's not me just saying this, but a lot of people in the past, they said, you only got to grow one crop of cotton and that person's changed forever. And I tell you what, I've seen that.
What does that mean?
Well, where people probably before they got involved in how much money you can make for doing so little,
Yeah.
and with the detriment to everything around and the community's all, along this river system of what you can just gain and get out of it. Of course, it costs a lot of money to do that as well, but to what the benefit is out of it, and the spruik of the amount of money that people make these days out of growing cotton has just been the detriment to these rivers, and it's just so obvious living on them all your life, and there's probably not too many that have got the guts to say that. But anyway, I'll say it, and I don't care that I do.
Having just flown over hectares upon hectares of green cotton farms, now flying over the lakes that were once dubbed the Kakadu of the South, it's really hard to sympathise with the perspective of multi-millionaire cotton irrigators. To keep the cotton fields green, the Menindee lakes have become green from blue-green algae. Water rarely gets down to Menindee, but when it does, well, it's drained. Why? So more water can go to the environment. Get that logic? No one does. But that's the Ouroboros thinking that infests water policy in this country. Badger Bates is a Barkanji elder who's had more experience with the basin than any of the city-based politicians running it, and he's not afraid to be vocal in his criticisms.
They've taken all the water up here, and it's not just from these rivers and the dams with Maureen and all that. Floodplain harvesting is still killing this part. This is the Barker, right? The Darling River. So you need more water to come in. Okay, it's just like this table. If I got this table and it was clay and I put a mark down like that, then draw all the rivers up here and put this mark down, there is other little tributaries that come in, little creeks, we call them out here, and you put all the little marks on this table, on this piece of paper, and you put water and lift it, it'll all run into one little place. And that's what's happening with the floodplain harvesting. Because they're taking all the water from the river and killing this river, nothing breeds much. And if you got something dead, that's where you get blue-green algae, because it's not moving, right?
Badger rejects any assertion that what's happening to the basin is the natural state of affairs and unpreventable, pointing out how long and well the Barker has survived. Up until now.
Megafauna is at Menindee. Again, you know, these giant kangaroos.
Yeah.
So it's there.
Yeah.
It's proven again that the Barker is there. Then if you go up the river from Vulcania, up around near Tilpa, before you get to Berg, again, in the Barker itself, we are finding fossils of snakes and crocodiles and all that, and giant emus in the Barker. We can't say where the name is because people are going to collect, but they're in the Barker. And the scientists are all there.
So, pretty much it's just evidence that the water system has stayed intact for at least 100,000 years, probably millions. And then in 10 years, it's pretty much dead.
It's gone.
Badger's right. Ecologists contend that because of the overuse of water, areas of the basin are grappling with an ecological step change.
So every ecosystem needs a certain amount of resilience. So Australian ecosystems, natural ecosystems, they've evolved to withstand our extremes of floods and droughts, for example. So one drought or one flood is not going to wipe out a healthy, resilient ecosystem. So ecologists talk about resilience. So you need enough resilience so you can, take a few hits in your ecosystem, and your ecosystem can recover. When you have an ecological step change, it's when one of these shocks, like a drought, wipes it out, and so we're no longer getting that recovery back when we get the good times with water. So, for example, in Narran Lakes, that's used to a sort of boom or bust, drought and flood sort of system. You've got vegetation there that all of the birds and fish and frogs, etc., rely on. And when you've got water there, they grow, they seed, the seeds drop back into the soil. The water goes away, the seeds are there for the next boom cycle. The seed bank's been destroyed. So if it can only survive 5 years or 7 years without water, and it's gone too long without water, next time you get water there aren't the seeds there, the stuff doesn't grow, everything that relies on it collapses. And you've got a changed ecosystem now. And something else will replace it, but it's not going to be the same thing that was there before.
The strange thing about this destruction is that it's quite a historical anomaly, in that this conflict between floodplain harvesters and everyone else is not going down as some David versus Goliath battle between industry and the environment. The majority of industry is on the side of the environment. Most of Australia's agriculture sector is being hurt by the Nationals' completely lopsided favouring of the cotton industry over every other type of produce. In the 2019 New South Wales state election, Helen Dalton broke decades of coalition incumbency to win the Southern Riverina seat of Murray from the Nationals. This was on the back of the Nationals further abandoning their traditional base of Aussie farmers and rural communities in favour of cotton farmers and foreign investors. I think the numbers were something along the lines of $2 billion worth of cotton that's mostly getting exported overseas anyway. For $25 billion worth of agricultural damage downstream. And that's food.
That's food, yeah.
So are you witnessing this in your electorate, that it's actually messing with Australia's food security now?
Of course it is. Absolutely. Well, we're going into a rice harvest now.
Yeah.
We've actually run out of Australian rice.
What?
We did. But you've got to see, within our electorate, we have a lot of processing too. So that rice gets processed. Well, you saw job losses in Leeton and Deniliquin. There's a couple of hundred job losses. Those people leave town. I mean, the impact on communities is huge because of the processing. The same with dairy. I mean, we've had, I think there was 70 odd dairies around Deniliquin. I think we're now about 20. And so that people leave. We've lost breeding stock. When people leave, kids leave the schools, gives the government an excuse to downgrade our services, not, downgrade the hospital, the education, there's usually kids leave and say you miss out on educational opportunities that you would have in a bigger school.
Oh, so it's not even just the money that is getting lost in terms of farm production and the job loss, but also then the government says, well, there's just not a population here, so you lose grant.
Yeah, bad luck.
Really?
Yeah, so now, you don't need that now because your school was once 800 kids and now you're only 200. And I know at Finley High, the decline in kids at the high school has been enormous in the last probably 15, 20 years, the same with Deniliquin. So it's just hardship for communities. And then on one hand, the government talks about decentralisation and all of that's, and then in the next hand, they're kind of kicking everyone in the guts. So
like shelling it, getting rid of all the infrastructure that could even hold up a population to begin with.
Don't spend the money in the out in the bush. Let's just all centralise it. But they talk about decentralisation. So talk's cheap.
One of the measures Dalton immediately attempted to introduce was water register, a common sense mechanism that would show who and what owns water in this country. It would bring transparency and shine a light on the players manipulating the water market. So common sense that the king of common sense, Alan Jones, came out swinging for it.
Helen Dalton is a farmer and she won a seat Parliament at the last election on the basis of water with a swing of over 24%. She has put a bill to the New South Wales Parliament where she seeks transparency on the ownership of water. She wants a register of all those who own water or whose families own water, in particular in relation to politicians, and that is going to be defeated by the Berejiklian government. Now, we have an outfit in this country called Duxton Water. You can Google them. Duxton. They don't own a handkerchief of land, but they own most of the water, and they sell it to farmers when it suits them at whatever inflated price they choose to levy upon the farmer. And this is called a fair dinkum Australia? I don't think so.
The importance of the bill is coupled with the fact mentioned earlier. Foreign traders don't have to pay capital gains on the money they make trading Australian water. Yet Aussie farmers do.
We've got some very, very bright kids that want to have a go, want to buy water and land and farm and produce food. They're behind the eight ball because of these, foreign interests, and that could be foreign governments too, owning our water, trading the water and not paying tax.
And they do. This isn't theoretical. They do
no,
do
they
this.
do. We've asked the ATO and they go, no, they don't have to. And of course, Minister Pavey approves those licences. And that she should be letting know or talking to the Australian Tax Office and saying, hey, look at this, there's a bit of a gap here. We're giving all these foreigners a free kick to the detriment of our own. Let's look after our own. But that's not, I don't know why they don't do it.
Despite how common sense this bill sounds and how popular it was amongst, everyone, It faced fierce opposition from the Nationals, but only after it faced even fiercer opposition from the New South Wales Irrigators Council. You know Helen Dalton's State Water Register? Why are you against it? It just seems like such a good idea.
I've watched the water market, how it works, pretty closely, and some of the behaviours of some of the big brokers and companies involved in all of that. So I think what she's proposed goes beyond. Is basically would put a lot of our mum and dad farms at risk of some of these big brokers and things who, basically they'll know what they own, they'll know what they grow, they'll be on the phone manipulating and trying to badger them. And and our membership, we are through the, this is what's the message that's come up from our membership, is that they don't want it to be a simple thing of like, you just type in Claire Miller and it pops up everything that Claire Miller owns in water, which, by the way, for the record, I do not own any water entitlements before that conspiracy gets going.
I don't know.
And I never have.
What's this?
There's already been 2 registers.
Sorry?
There's already been 2 registers.
And there's already a water register which is searchable, no different to a property register, where if you have the property number, you can and pay. You can find find out all you want to know, but you need to pay.
Just pause it here. The register Claire's talking about is not searchable by name. You need to quote a specific licence number, and irrigation corporations aren't on it. So it's really not much use, is it?
$25 to get property titles. It's no different in the water register.
Right.
So it's already, you can find out anything you want if you want to pay for it.
Well, do you want me to go through the conspiracy theories?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Why not?
Because, really, when you look at it, with water register and floodplain harvesting, it seems like the National Party just takes your guys' recommendations. From like a really superficial glance, which is all I can do, it just looks like that they kind of just take your guys' advice on that, and that kind of becomes what their policy is.
Well, if you're sort of saying that somehow we all sit around in some basement smoking cigars and drinking whiskey and cooking up
that
conspiracies,
is what I'm saying.
No, we don't. We're an apolitical advocacy group. We maintain good relationships right across the whole political spectrum.
Well,
we don't. We are not puppets of the National Party, but neither are they our puppets.
No, I think that they're your guys'.
We don't have that much influence.
Right. Well, what are the areas that you guys oppose the National Party in when it comes to water policy? Can you give me some examples of what? No, I'm not being unfair and cutting off an answer. Claire couldn't give an example of where the National Party opposes the Irrigators Council. All right, I'll play the rest just to be fair.
An example? On the water register, for example, where, there's been very broad support across groups to keep the water register as it is now, and also for the ACCC review into water markets, which has also got recommendations around ways to improve transparency and water registers and so forth. So that's what we're relying on, is recommendations from the ACCC on how to make the water market work better and have greater transparency and so forth.
But they're pretty much the only ones that oppose
groups.
it, though, right?
Sorry?
Like, politically. They're really the only ones that oppose Helen Dalton's water registry, right?
Well, I didn't see the Labor Party rushing to vote for it.
They did, didn't they?
Did they?
Yeah, they did.
I'm not sure where they landed.
They did. Because Helen Dalton's selling point for the last by-election was based on.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's, yeah.
Yeah, but I'd have to check as well, yeah.
But, no. Our members made it very clear that they did not support what Helen Dalton was proposing. We're a membership-based organisation. Our policy is developed through our members.
Claire's probably right, but the reason she's right, well, it'd kind of be better for her if she were wrong, as I've been informed that the New South Wales irrigators have been hemorrhaging members. Downstream irrigators have been leaving the New South Wales Irrigators Council in droves, further concentrating the membership of the organisation in the camp of northern cotton farmers who would naturally be more opposed to this transparency. I kind of heard from southern irrigators that there's a bit of a civil war happening, and that's affecting your guys' membership because they're kind of breaking away.
No,
is that what you think's happened?
No. Again, I spent a lot of time down in the Southern Basin, and we have many Southern Basin members.
Well, what's the divide between northern and southern irrigators, do you think, in membership? Do you think that you're weighted towards northern irrigators?
No, we're not. When we go through our levy base, no, we're not. We have had a couple of members break away for various reasons, but we still have many levy payers and member organisations in the Southern Basin as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's just quite comfortable. We fully represent the whole basin.
Despite assurances to the contrary, the political establishment's abandonment of downstream irrigators is a pervasive message you hear any time you speak to farmers in the south.
Well, the Irrigators Council is certainly the people that are that sit on Irrigators Council are supposed to represent their part of the world. And what we found on Irrigators Council was certainly weighted very heavily to the northern irrigators. And I know that because I used to sit on Irrigators Council, and there's a few people that have got a lot of money and a lot of influence, and they'll infiltrate these organisations and to get what they want, to be heard. So they're lobbying, and they would be lobbying. They would be. I would think they would be giving money to the National Party, or the coalition, either from in the federal arena, and then somehow that gets divvied up, because there are some rules in state. And giving lots of money to these groups such as New South Wales Farmers, New South Wales Irrigators Council, all those to make sure that they get heard and make sure they get their way. And they have over the years. Yeah.
Do you think that is it a fair assessment to say that the National Party has kind of left southern New South Wales to the wolves, and they're heavily favouring northern New South Wales? I
would think so. And you've only got to be in those towns where, our health services have been declining and continue to decline. They're spending a fair bit of money in National Party seats up there, and almost in some cases, particularly even in John Barilaro's seat, where it's almost gold-plated, and we're desperate for a few things in our seat.
Behind the scenes, what you find is very wide, broad agreement that's then not helped by, say, media narratives and some political quarters that would rather try and say, oh no, we're all hopelessly divided, because that's just not what our experience has been.
If somebody's given them a whole lot of money to advocate for them, that party has taken it, then they're beholden to that group. So these political donations, I think we have to really have a look at, because they're influencing policy. It's random policy. It's like for select groups. You've only got to see that with how DPI Water don't consult with people in the south, even though we're stakeholders in water. They exclude us, and it's deliberate. So they consult with their friendly people that want something and rubber stamp everything, and that includes Irrigators Council. Oh yeah, they said that. Irrigators Council represent everyone. No, they don't. They do not at all. They certainly don't represent communities at all in the south. And a lot of organisations in the south that were sitting around that table with them have pulled out.
Really?
Well, they spend a lot of money to sit at the table and not getting anything for it. So why sit there?
Why bother?
And when I used to be there, I'd say, oh my God, why are these organisations spending so much money when giving it to New South Wales Irrigators Council to beat us up and not represent us? Why would we do that?
Helen Dalton's support centres around the agricultural mecca of Griffith. Along with the usual problems downstream towns struggle with, Griffith is facing a unique health crisis, potentially spurred on by water mismanagement. Griffith has 7 times the rate of motor neuron disease compared to the national average. It's also recently been dealing with a lot of fish kills and blue-green algae blooms in the local lake, a lake which, due to shortages, sometimes becomes the town's water source. Tanya Magocci is a Griffith resident who suffers from motor neuron disease and reckons there's a connection.
You look at all the clusters, there's one here, there's one in Coffs Harbour, and then you look at the clusters overseas, all the clusters are with blue-green algae, all of them.
Right. So what is it? What do they think the link is between the two?
That the blue-green algae attacks our neurons and kills them in our brain.
From the drinking water?
From even breathing it in. In my household, we don't touch the town water. Everything's bottled. The only thing we use is to shower, but...
Even then you close your mouth?
Yep. Even brushing our teeth, all bottled water.
But then again, I suppose it doesn't really matter if you're just breathing it in anyway.
Yep.
Brutal. Despite there being simple and cheap measures that could be taken to study and prevent the situation from deteriorating further, the response from the New South Wales and local government has bordered on apathetic to hostile. When you talk to, I'm guessing like local council, what's their response? When it talks about motor neuron disease and the fish kill, what do they say?
Okay, so we brought down the #1 professor who works with motor neuron disease. We brought down the 2 researchers for motor neuron disease down to Griffith. We called a meeting for all council workers, for the boat people to come. The council came, they lasted not even halfway through the meeting, got up and walked out.
What do you mean they walked out?
They got up and walked out of the meeting and left.
Not because they were busy or something?
No, because they didn't like what the scientists were saying.
On top of this, the New South Wales government has continually refused requests to fund a study.
Victorian government gives them $4 million a year for research. So I've asked our government to match them. Match Victoria government, give us $4 million. No, we get zero. Absolutely nothing.
You don't think it's the fact that if they do prove the link, then all of a sudden they're like liable for cases?
Definitely. But us as patients, like I have support groups, right? Us as patients and us and all the carers, we don't care about suing anyone. We care about finding out what causes our disease so we can fucking find a treatment. Instead of telling our patients, sorry, you got motor neuron disease, go home, you're going to die within 1 to 3 years. There's nothing I can do for you. Like, at least we just want to have some hope, for fuck's sake. You know, give us something. We don't care about suing and all that kind of shit. We just want to find out what's going on.
Tanya has become so fed up with the lack of action that she's been doing the government's work for them, regularly collecting urine samples from motor neuron disease sufferers and making the 7-hour trip to Sydney to drop the urine off to Macquarie Uni neuroscientist Jules Guillermin.
But even like the collection, like I had to collect anyone that's used the lake, so I called out for people to give me urine samples, which is not nice, but I collected them all, right? I sent out the tubes. On one morning I collected them all. I had to drive them all the way to Sydney to get it to Jill's within 24 hours, right? So you could
Pressure's
test them.
on, yeah.
And I did that out of my own back because they've got no money to do it. And he's doing it, not getting paid. And I just think that's wrong.
And still, possibly the scariest fact about all of this is that the council does not alert the people of Griffith when water from Lake Wyangan, possibly tainted from blue-green algae, goes into their homes.
We're not told when there's blue-green algae bloom out here.
Oh, so we've heard.
Right, and we're not told when they give it to our fucking taps in our water, but we turn our taps. We turn the taps on and it's fully brown and it stinks, and we take photos of it and send it to council. Oh yeah, sorry, we had to take water from the lake. But how about you tell us beforehand?
Unfortunately, motor neuron disease is far from the only health crisis that appears to be exacerbated by water mismanagement.
The Murrumbidgee Health region, which is from here down to the Murray River, has a higher suicide rate in Australia. And that's just not to be ignored. You know, the mental health issues with people under extreme stress. I mean, you know, farmers that have had properties handed down to them by generations and through no fault of their own have had the water turned off. You know, and they've invested in irrigation systems or dairies and they don't have any water to grow grass, and they just going broke, and it kills them. You know, it's just too embarrassing for them to handle. It's worse than that. I know plenty of blokes that are killed in single vehicle accidents just drive into a tree because they want their wife to still get the insurance.
Really?
Yeah, but they're not considered a suicide. It's a car accident.
No.
But they want their wife to still get the insurance. I mean, that is the level of concern. Blokes are watching their mates, closely, because farmers are pretty proud people, and they don't want to be embarrassed, by being forced off the land.
How much blame do you put on the crop cotton?
It's not so much the crop cotton that I blame. I blame the leadership in the industry. They've just been absolute cowboys, a real sense of entitlement. They take whatever they can get, and they've gone too far. I blame the politicians, and I blame the bureaucrats who facilitate this. There is no question that the amount of cotton we are growing and the amount of water that we are harvesting in the Northern Basin has had a completely destructive, possibly irreversible effect on the ecosystems for the rest of the basin. It is. You've got people in Wilcannia, there are Barkindji there. It's well known that when there's no water, suicide rates, violence, domestic violence, crime, drug use all goes up. When there is water, it all goes down.
As we fly out of Bourke, we're taken over a cotton farm that rivals Cubby in scope. This is Darling Farms, owned by Joe Robinson. It's safe to say that Robinson is an exceedingly wealthy man. In 2018, his farms were set to produce over $70 million worth of cotton. Cotton produced with the help of some of the largest private water storages in the country, and the last water storages before the town of Wilcannia. Wilcannia is a town that sits on the Darling around 200 kilometres east of Broken Hill with a population of 500. Its population has had to bear the brunt of not only the corruption of the National Party networks, but wholesale government neglect. Michael Kennedy is a Barkindji man from Wilcannia who has witnessed the decline of the Darling in his lifetime. How old are you now, Michael?
38, mate.
Yeah. And you've been here your whole life?
Yeah, lived here all my life. Born on the river here, and spent all my life here.
Right. When you were a kid, did the river look like that?
Nah, not even close to that, mate. When I was a kid growing up, we had consistent flows coming down the river, and it did get low at times, but it was for a short period of time, and then there'd be more water that come down and replenish the river again.
What all of this really says is that we need the regulations to reduce licence and meter floodplain harvesting to avoid, to basically get clarity on this.
But why not just make it illegal?
Because you get massive floods go through. Wouldn't you say it was reasonable for people to be able to take some of that and put it in their storages to tide them over in these drought periods so that they can keep growing some crops?
I don't know. I'm just not a water expert. I don't know. But it's just, when I see dry riverbeds in Wilcannia, I think there's definitely not enough water coming in. And it's getting taken from somewhere. It has to be. It can't just be climate change.
That is mostly, if it doesn't rain, the rivers don't run. So floodplain harvesting only happens when there's a flood. So if that riverbed is dry, it's because there hasn't been any floods.
Up north, there is a lot of floodplain harvesting. Do you think that the people that are doing this, which is an illegal practice, I guess they're trying to legalise it, but do you think that they think about towns like Wilcannia?
No, of course not, mate. When it comes to greed such as that, they don't care about a little small community like Wilcannia or Menindee or Tilpa or Louth. Like, we're just a small population caught in the middle overall, and they really don't care about us.
Yeah. Because you do have a water licence, yeah?
Yeah, we do have a small water licence on one of the properties that we own here. It's only a small one, but we could use that and sell water, but we choose not to because we just feel that it's wrong, and it's just helping into, killing the river system more.
There's this fatalistic line that the Irrigators Council take, and that is that the decline is the natural order of things, and that all that can be done is legalise taking more water. This line becomes more and more absurd as you talk to people who live in the basin. Even more absurd when you contrast Wilcannia with the great wealth of men just upstream like Joe Robinson, who's probably richer than the entire town. Is there aquatic life in it anymore?
There is. Yeah, there's still aquatic life in it, but it's becoming more rarer.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we get littler fish out of it now, and it takes a lot longer, you know, to get a feed of fish or yabbies or whatever out of it, because there's just not the flows coming down anymore to replenish everything.
Right. So back when you were a kid, you could just live off the river if you wanted.
Yeah, that's what we basically did. We barely lived out of the shop. Like, you know, I remember my old grandmother, she'd only go to the shop just to buy some vegetables and stuff like that. The meat, we basically got out of the river, kangaroo off the land, but fish was in our diet, you know, 3-4 times a week, consistently throughout the year. Yeah.
And what is it now?
Well, I had a feed of fish probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Oh.
That was my first feed of fish in about 8 months or so.
Yeah. So, like, does anyone eat fish on a weekly basis now, or is it just that's the norm?
That's the new norm. Like, that's the new normal. We, you know, it's rare now that we get a feed of fish, and when we do get these little bits of rise, what we call shut up water, we try to get down as much as we can and get as much feed of fish as we can, because we know it's not going to last long like it used to. Like,
perhaps the only reason people know about Wilcannia is its life expectancy. Numbers so low that they not only rival the poorest and most war-torn countries in the world, Wilcannia beats them by over a decade.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's around 37.8 for a male and around 40 odd for a female.
Yeah.
You know, so it is horrendous. And,
yeah,
you know, I look at that and I think that the river has a big part to do with that, because, again, when I was a kid growing up, we spent hours and hours in the river. We was swimming, we was catching fish, we was eating traditional foods that are so healthy for you. And then the physical and mental side of it, of being able to come down and just spend hours in the river swimming for non-stop, like hours. You know, how good is that for a young man or woman to just be able to swim for hours and take a feed of fish home, and then after doing all that physicality in the river, going home, having a good feed of some good healthy food, you know, traditional food. Like, it was the best feeling ever. And you know, so it plays a major part in, you know, us as Aboriginal people living on the river here, with health and the life expectancy. Like I said, in all them areas, it plays a major part, the river system.
You might be thinking, what is the Berejiklian government doing to help these people? Well, you'd be forgiven for thinking nothing, as she indignantly refused to visit Menindee during the fish kills and never steps foot in Wilcannia.
Wentworth Shire, similarly on water restrictions in comparison. Menindee has a population of around 300 and they're at level 1.
Do you think that there's any government officials that listen to this town's concerns, or do you think that they're all ignoring you? Is there any standout ones that are helping?
No, look, I couldn't really say off the top of my head if there was a standout one, but, you know, we've had certain departments come out here, and for me, I feel like once they get back on that highway and go back to wherever they come from, it sort of stops there, like, because there's no consistency with, you know, keeping us up to date out here on what's going on, and, you know, the things that we'd like to see change with the river so we can have more consistent flows come down. Like, we just feel like that when they walk out the door, it's left there and that's it. And for us, it's heartbreaking, it's frustrating, you know, because it's our people that's suffering, and they don't understand or realise how much we are suffering because of the river.
Despite it sitting on the Darling, over the past few years, Wilcannia was out of water. You'd think for any town, let alone one with a life expectancy that low, there'd be some sort of government response. I heard that the government had to start shipping in bottled water. Is that true?
Shipping in water is the true part, but it wasn't the government that did it. It was, you know, some kind, generous people that donated quite a fair bit of water to us here for a bit of a lengthy time.
How long's a lengthy time?
Just going on memory, I reckon it was around 5-6 months, maybe a bit longer, mate.
6 months?
Yeah, that we were on donated water for, so yeah, living on the river and being, getting water donated to you, there's something pretty wrong.
Yeah, it's an irony, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the community, when the river gets too low, it lives off bore water. The Shire Council here, has got a couple of bores set up downstream further that they have to pump out of to keep the town supply of water up to it. We've never ever had to experience that before. A community living on the river have to rely on bore water. They were only put in recently, the bores. So again, you can see the effect that all this irrigating and everything else. You can see the effect that it's got on the river system when river towns are relying on charities and stuff to donate water to us, and we have to live on bore water.
And phenomenal that the government, even though I thought that this might have just been for 2 weeks, and even that would have been horrendous, but the government didn't do anything about it for 6 months. After visiting Wilcannia, it seems unconscionable to defend taking more water upstream, or even the amount that's taken now. Yet the Irrigators Council continues to argue in favour of legalising floodplain harvesting, a main argument of theirs being, if it's legalised, it'll be under cap. Mary Ann Slattery's research has exposed this to be a blatant mistruth. Tell us how they fudge the numbers of water.
There's lots and lots of ways that they fudge the numbers, but I'll give you one that's relevant to floodplain harvesting. So the government has never measured floodplain harvesting and has allowed floodplain harvesting to grow, and they admit that. And they say that while we've let it grow, we're going to issue licences and we're going to reduce those licences back to a legal limit. Now that legal limit is something that was set under either the Murray-Darling Basin cap, which is the limit at 1994, or the limit in the New South Wales water sharing plans. So they've made a big song and dance about how we're reducing, floodplain harvesting has grown, we're reducing it back to legal limits, but they just changed the legal limits.
Really?
Yes, they tell everybody the legal limit is 450 when really the legal limit is 320. And they say, aren't we great? This is one example. Aren't we great because we reduced the floodplain harvesting number from 170 to 100 odd, when actually they've increased it from 18 odd up to 100 odd. And this is just one example of what they do throughout everything to do with water, but it's very relevant for floodplain harvesting because they're just conning everybody about what the legal limits are and what they're reducing water to, when they're actually allowing a huge increase in growth and hoping that nobody will notice.
The New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, DPIE, say that the average extractions, including floodplain harvesting, is 480 gigalitres in the Guaidia Valley. They admit this exceeds cap, which they say is 431 gigalitres. They say legalising floodplain harvesting will cut licences back to cap, constituting a cut to irrigation by 49 gigalitres. However, their number for cap, 431 gigalitres, is completely invented. The official cap is 350 gigalitres. So instead of reducing take by 49 gigalitres, they've actually added 81 gigalitres. No wonder the world of water has been described as post-truth.
What's your view on cap? And do you believe floodplain harvesting, if it's regulated, do you believe it will be in cap?
Okay, the way the cap works, it's on all diversions. Okay, so what it means is that you've got general security licences already in all of those valleys. Okay, you've got an allowed take under that. You've got supplementary licences as well. Okay, with every year they determine how much they're allowed to take under those. And then if it floods, you'll have a licence to be able to take a certain volume if and when it floods. Collectively, all those together will need to be under cap. The growth in floodplain harvesting over the last 20 years, when it floods, means that take has been above cap, that total take. So that's what the licensing is about, is to pull it back.
So when it is licensed under PAVI's regulations, or will it be under cap?
Yes, we expect so.
It appears proponents of floodplain harvesting are not only indifferent to the suffering they cause, but are willing to discard facts to advance their case. Here's New South Wales Nationals Water Minister Melinda Pavey doing exactly that in an ABC article that perpetuates the mistruth. And it's not like these are harmless mistakes or even harmless lies. The government's manipulation of numbers will have dire consequences.
This is a brutal question, but what happened to the elderly when the flow started dying?
Well, it makes them sick because they don't, again, they've lived on this type of food for many, many years. And when they don't have access to that food, they've got to adjust their body, I guess, to new food sources. And, we feel like that food is not, or their body is not acceptable to that type of food. And they become sicker a lot quicker. Yeah.
What about the land animals? Have they decreased?
They have decreased,
So there's less kangaroos?
Yeah.
Less bird life?
Yep, there's definitely less bird life, less kangaroos get around the area. Kookaburras, the same, you rarely ever see kookaburras now. And as we stand here right now, talking to you, it's like, once upon a time you'd hear kookaburras all up and down this river singing out and carrying on. And we've been here for a little while now and we haven't heard one or seen one. So
yeah, you're right.
It does.
Now that you mention it, it's like eerily quiet here.
Yeah, that's the effect that it has. Like and us, again as Aboriginal people, we are linked to everything. We are linked to the river, we are linked to the bird life, the animal life on the land. Our spirits and our dreaming, our stories are all about the river and everything that evolves around the river, and it has an impact on everything and everyone around the river.
Before we flew over these cotton farms, Chris, our pilot, was threatened. Someone threatened to shoot his plane out of the sky if they saw it flying over their property. The person that threatened Chris was a man by the name of Jim Cush, a cotton farmer from the Gwydir Valley. Jim Cush also happens to be the chairman of New South Wales Irrigators Council and Claire Miller's colleague. Flying over his property, we realised why he was so averse to having anyone see it. According to Slattery, most of the water in storages in the Gwydir, where Jim's property is located, had to have come from floodplain harvesting. There were full dams at the end of the season, but Gwydir irrigators use less than half of their river and aquifer allocations. That is, the rest had to have come from floodplain harvesting. And here's Jim's cotton, green and his storage is full. So to end our interview with Claire, we decided to ask her about her thoughts on Jim Cush. We were flying over some of the properties in the north, and we went past the CEO Jim Cush's.
No, the chair.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it was the chair. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Jim Cush's. I'm talking to the CEO.
Sorry, when did you fly over?
About a couple of months ago, maybe, something like that. And yeah, they were just pointing it out, and there was just so much water stored on the property.
And what are you suggesting, that it was?
I don't know, it's just it should, here's a photo of it. This can't be natural. Look at that. And if that's if the Department of Planning and Industry and Environment is just they're the ones that are saying you shouldn't be doing this.
I'm sorry, but
should we just be abiding by that?
That water that's sitting in there is water that would have been accessed from general security allocations and supplementary, and there would be some, possibly from some of the localised floods and things, some flood water. NRA visits this property all the time, so.
But hypothetically, if we could prove that it wasn't.
Accessed.
But if we could prove that
There's
it wasn't.
no hypothetical about proving that it wasn't.
But if it wasn't, would you support that?
We support legally accessed water.
So if it's illegally accessed water, you wouldn't approve of it?
Are you suggesting that water was illegally accessed?
Other people are.
Well, other people can say that, but let's say NRA inspects Jim's property regularly. It's such a high-profile person. That water is accessed legally. Just because people say things and want it to be true doesn't make it true.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Just because people say things and want it to be true doesn't make it true. I think this video has proven that quote best applies to the National Party, New South Wales government, or anyone claiming floodplain harvesting is legal or even moral. Because we can't live without water. Suicide, health crises, economic depression, food shortages, extinctions, and ecological step changes, all just collateral damage in the National Party's handling of water in this country, and it's not going to get better until they're out of office. Share this doco with anyone you know who might even be slightly concerned with the future of Australia. Follow Mary Ann's firm, Slattery & Johnson, on social media, and if you can, throw them some money. They're doing exceptional research on the Murray-Darling Basin. Their research seems to be some of the only stuff that holds the government to account. Links are in the description. Also, speaking of holding the government to account, there's a New South Wales Upper House inquiry on floodplain harvesting going on, and they're accepting submissions. Feel free to let them know your thoughts, and if you can, please become a Patreon supporter. As if you didn't know already, we're fighting multiple civil and criminal legal battles instigated by the leader of the New South Wales National Party, John Barilaro. These abuses of the law by the Deputy Premier are attempts to censor us and shut down videos like this. This video was slated to come out much earlier until my producer Christo was violently arrested by a terror unit. That's how evil the National Party is. Not only have they caused the bulk of the problems examined in this video, but they use secret police to intimidate journalists that expose that fact. Helen Dalton, who deals with the Nationals daily, knows their tactics and predicted this. It's only thanks to your continued financial support that they won't be successful in shutting us up. The Nationals do not care about farmers. They do not care about regional towns. They do not care about Australians. What they do care about is themselves. They are pigs, and the Murray-Darling is their trough.